David Pollack chimed in the middle of the Georgia game. He didn't even let the game end before he tweeted that there's a new number one team in the country, and that is the Georgia Bulldogs. Well, they've been number one for most of the year, and then when it comes to the College Football Playoff Committee, Georgia has been number 2 for the last 2 weeks. But David, Georgia's been one all year. But I think he's talking about the College Football Playoff rankings, where the committee has Ohio State number 1, and for the first 2 weeks of the College Football Playoff. And now things have changed heading into this next one, heading into the 3rd week of the College Football Playoff rankings. There are 2 more regular season games left, and then conference championship week. So there's only 3 more games of data, and for most teams, there's only 2 more games of data for the College Football Playoff Committee to make their rankings and select the 4 to go in at this point in time. And has Georgia done enough to flip the committee's view and have Georgia as the number 1 team in the country heading into, it's not week 11, but heading into game 11 for most of these teams? Obviously, I think everyone is kind of, after buys now, I think everyone is about in the same boat, and Georgia's 11th game will be up in Knoxville. Are the Dogs number 1? It is my opinion, and I think I've seen, I have not wavered really in thinking that Georgia is the best team in college football this year. From the jump, for the most part, I've been pretty bullish about saying that I think Georgia's number 1. And at the end of the day, without just looking at them playing, just without the team playing, because the team is playing better now than it did in September, and it is, I think, easier to defend that Georgia should be number 1 than it was 2 months ago. But it's because of the roster, it's the depth, it's the coaching staff, and it's the discipline and what's on the line. This Georgia team is fighting, and it's now beating really, really good teams, because the committee had Ohio State won over Georgia, and then Georgia wins a top 12 matchup in Athens by 9 points. They beat number 12 Missouri 30-21. Not a dominant game, but let's compare it. So at this point, let's compare it to, well, you know what? And then Georgia goes and beats Ole Miss. Top 10 matchup, college game days in Athens. Everyone in college football is watching the Georgia Bulldogs at night at 7 o'clock. Ole Miss is a big brand in the sport, so it's a big game. It was an electric atmosphere. It wasn't quite a top-tier atmosphere, but it was really, really, really good. The Georgia Bulldog fans show up, and that's not a negative comment. That's me just kind of evaluating what I thought, because let's face it, I've been to these atmospheres over the last few years, so I've seen them, and I saw Notre Dame 2019, and that one is hard to top as well. I don't think that crowd quite hit what 2019 Notre Dame's crowd did. So that's kind of my take on that. If you didn't go to both of those, or if you want to kind of know, that's how that goes. That was a side tangent. Moving on. And real quick, Ryan Curley from Dawg Post newsletter is down below. Make sure you're being a 5-star Georgia fan and signing up for that. All you got to do is put your email in that link in the description, and you're going to get those stories in your inbox every single day. Free, premium, insider. It's all in your inbox every single day. Thanks. Got that out of the way. So Georgia wins that matchup, and they still had Ohio State at number 1 after Georgia beat Missouri, and after Ohio State, I can't remember who Ohio State played last week. So now this week it'll be interesting. Ohio State plays Michigan State, really bad team. Michigan State enters that game 3-6. Ohio State wins 38-3, just completely dominates the first half, wins that game in the first half, scores almost all of its points in the first half, takes care of business against a bad team. So Ohio State did what it technically needed to do to remain at number 1. But then Georgia, follows that up with beating number 9 Ole Miss 52-17. 52-17. Just dominating. It was 14-14. It was 14-14. I don't want to do the math. What's 52 minus 14? I can't math right now. Is it 38? Is it 38? So after 14-14, Georgia outscored Ole Miss 38-3. Let's put it that way. That's what the score of Ohio State to Michigan State was, 38-3. So Georgia, pretty much with the same margin of victory, but over a top 10 team in Ole Miss. Now here's where you can start to get into comparisons as well. A point why I think Georgia should be number 1 over Ole Miss, and why I'm predicting that the committee is going to put the Dogs on top. But now we have some ranked team sample size, and we have it with Michigan too. Another notion was that if Michigan just crushed Penn State, I thought the committee might consider putting Michigan at 1 just because of how it dominated its bad competition throughout the first 9 games of the season. Michigan just absolutely dominated, only allowing 5-6 points per game, having a pretty good offense, one of the better offenses in college football, has a really good run game. J.J. McCarthy, a Heisman candidate. I don't think J.J. McCarthy really played that well against Penn State. I didn't think he had like a Heisman type of game in a top 10 matchup for Penn State. But now you look at Penn State and you got to view them similar. They're ranked similar to Ole Miss and Missouri, are they not? Are the Nittany Lions not ranked similar to Ole Miss and Missouri? Well, Georgia just thumped Ole Miss. Michigan, it was obvious that Michigan was the better team and takes control of that game in the second quarter. I watched most of the game. I got to be honest with you, that was a boring football game, and I had a hard time getting through it all the way. Michigan completely took control when I went up in the fourth quarter, 24 to 9, I think is what the score was, when Michigan just took control. Maybe it was 24 to 6. The Wolverines took complete control, and it was a boring game. It was a boring Big Ten game where it was power football and who was going to win power football, and Michigan was going to win that. Penn State is not a top 10 college football team. It's now lost to 2 top 3 teams, right? Those are its 2 losses, and it's going to remain kind of a fringe top 10 team in the college football rankings just because those are the 2 L's. But this Penn State team is not great, and if it lined up against Missouri, if it lined up against Ole Miss, I think those SEC teams might beat it. Call it SEC bias if you want. I call it eye test, and I know what I've seen, and I think Missouri's a good football team, and we talked about this, throughout the last 2 weeks. I thought Missouri, I thought Missouri was going to give Georgia a harder time than Ole Miss, and that ended up being the case because I think Missouri is just a little bit better of a football team than the Rebels. Rebels, high octane offense, can make flashy plays, has a really, really good back. I thought the defense was overrated. I think that people looked at the turnover margin numbers about Ole Miss and claimed they had a good defense. Ole Miss never had a good defense. It was a defense that you could trot out there, but it wasn't a defense that was going to stop a high-end offense. And a high-end offense just put up 52 on it. And now Georgia, is just been grilled about its cupcake schedule. In 3 ranked matchups, has outscored its opponents in a big, big way. And in the 2 ranked matchups where people are like, oh, night game in Sanford, all eyes are on you. Guess what? Georgia puts up 50 on Kentucky and then puts up 50 on Ole Miss. That is what Georgia can be. Puts up 40-something on Florida, another matchup where all eyes were on Georgia. What will they do without Brock Bowers? How will Georgia's offense look without Brock Bowers? Georgia's offense looked really good without Brock Bowers, and it's even better with it in the lineup. Now Georgia's got its full arsenal of offensive players kind of healthy for the first time, out there playing at least for the first time, not 100%. When you talk about Amarius Mims, the offensive line is playing at a really high level. Carson Beck's only been sacked, 8-9 times this year? Georgia just ran for 300 yards on an SEC football team. Georgia just put up 600 yards. Michigan, as good as it is, didn't do that just didn't dominate ranked Penn State. Noon game, weird matchup, white out for Penn State, but whatever. Ohio State, I just don't feel like they have the offense. The defense is really, really, really good. And I think Michigan's defense also showed is really, really good. Notice how I'm not talking about any other teams because I think that's kind of the conversation right now. Florida State, look, it might be a playoff team, but it's not a number 1 team. And I think everyone's kind of accepted that at this point. Washington beats Utah, doesn't blow Utah out, but that's another ranked win for Washington. Now I think we're getting into the conversation, does Washington jump Florida State at 4 for the rankings this week? I think that's something that we might see. I'm not completely predicting that, but yeah, I've got Georgia at 1. I kind of just gave some reasons why. David Pollack didn't even take him the whole game to determine that Georgia was the top team in the country. What do you guys think? Thanks for watching, and thanks for signing up for the newsletter down below.